I'm Chad Harvey, and this is AI for the C-Suite, the show for senior leaders who know AI matters and need to figure out what to do about it. Each episode, we dig into what it all actually means for middle market orgs, how it's changing decisions, strategy, leadership, and the nature of work. Let's get into it. Today, I am trying something a little bit different. If you remember those teasers for 80s and 90s TV shows where they promised a very special episode this week, that is us. So today, on a very special episode of Blossom, or AI for the C-Suite, whatever, I'm pleased to introduce our audience to the AI Super Friends, a semi-regular AI jam session that riffs and goes some unexpected places. So let's meet our guests. Mike Gadsby, co-founder and chief innovation officer of O3XO, O3 World. There's a lot of O's in there. Mike founded O3 World 20 years ago in Fishtown, Philadelphia, and he's since turned it into a digital consultancy, an AI strategy practice, a venture arm, and the 1682 conference, because apparently one company wasn't enough company for Mike. He teaches graduate courses on this stuff, speaks at industry events constantly, and somehow still finds time to co-manage a team of about 40 people from Frankfurt Avenue. Mike, you brought half your roster this episode, so I'm holding you personally responsible for how this all goes.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad.
You bet. Arjun Jain, co-founder of Pre.dev. Arjun has dual degrees from Penn Engineering and Wharton, and he's put those both to use building Pre.dev, a platform where autonomous agents scope, architect, and ship entire software apps going from 0 to 400K in annual recurring revenue in about the time it takes most startups to finish their pitch deck. Before that, he organized a concert, an auction, and a documentary filmed during the Bihar floods to raise over $100,000 for schools in India while still an undergrad. So yes, the man can ship and not just code. Arjun, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Diego Morales, Vice President of AI at O3XO. Diego has held basically every title that means the technology is your problem now, including CTO, CIO, and VP of Engineering across more than 21 years of tech enterprise leadership before landing as VP of AI at O3XO. His last gig before this was running software engineering for a surveillance and security infrastructure company, which is the kind of domain where move fast and break things means cameras go dark and buildings go unmonitored. He now helps companies figure out which AI use cases will actually survive contact with their engineering team, and I suspect that his tolerance for impressive demos doesn't go far when production is approximately 0. Diego, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Chad. Pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. Mike Ergman, Chief Tech Ops Officer at Besteg. Mike is the CTOO at Besteg, the Delaware fintech where he drove a reported 300 to 400% productivity lift through Agile, launched a financial wellness platform that grabbed 215,000 users in year one, and built an internal AI council to survey how employees were already using ChatGPT before pointing any of it at a customer. He earned his ops stripes early when he was simultaneously Besteg's head of product and the guy in charge of the building's HVAC and touchless water coolers, which is the most operations leader sentence I have ever read out loud. Mike, welcome.
Thanks. Happy to be a part of the podcast.
And finally, last but definitely not least, Josh Friedman, staff engineer at O3 World. Josh spent a decade as a wedding and bar mitzvah DJ, enrolled in sound engineering school in New Haven, caught pneumonia and went home, detoured through community college psych with a side interest in criminal profiling, and eventually landed a computer science degree from Rutgers when he realized coding scratched the same creative itch as music production. He's now a staff engineer at O3, shipping AI features and writing public takes on Gemini's million token context window, and he still produces music on the side, including branding sound for O3 itself. Josh, welcome to the show. I have a lot of questions, and only some of them are about code.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to talk.
All right, guys. Super Friends. Convene. I don't know. What was the activation phrase there? Super Friends. Let's go. I don't know. So, all right. Let's kick this off. Mike, you had teed up a great question for us prior to this call that I think is a wonderful place for us to start. You suggested that we talk about whether existing frameworks can support AI adoption, and you connected that to two very specific things. You talked about agentic systems and the productivity versus enterprise question. So before we go anywhere else, first, are we kidding ourselves that the playbooks we already have are going to stretch this far? And I'm going to turn initially to Mike Urban. Mike, you are already operating inside a regulated fintech using mostly existing org machinery. Does this hold up at scale, or are we about to find the breaking point?
And it's a great question to kick it off. We've been actively dealing with this conversation, particularly on the agentic front at Besteg. I will tell you, I think the way that the posture has shifted on our side is a lot of companies and a lot of what you hear out in the market is people are talking about fully autonomous agents. In a highly regulated company, we can't think about it that way. So the way that we're talking about it, that seems to be gaining some traction for us, is there are agents that we have that are they're not fully autonomous. We're calling them well-governed agents, and they're operating within some control boundaries. And then we're making sure that the human intervention or human in the loop is designed at the right failure points. And I think that's the first way we're thinking about it. And it's not too dissimilar how we talk about human to human interaction at Besteg, right? So there's some check and balance when there is a human doing something that we feel is vital or critical to the business. And we have a system that's checking them, whether that's a report that we build, or we have a second set of eyes if that's a peer programming. And so I think what we're looking to do is in those places where maybe we have dual humans, or we have a system that maybe is a little bit archaic and not as good at making some of those decisions and catching those failure points, that's where we're starting to talk about how agents can help us. And so right now, I don't know that the frameworks are too far off, but they're definitely not exactly the way we have to have them now with this new technology.
I'm interested in some of the folks from O3 as well, because you're seeing this across a broad range of client applications. You're seeing this play out in multiple industries. Same take, different take, any nuances there?
I'll hop in. Yeah, I would say generally, every company's different. Their AI maturity comes down to, that's the old terms, right? People, process, technology, and kind of, but I would add on data as a part of that too, right? Which is a big part of this, and how well structured they are for this. I think the real challenge, particularly when we start thinking about agentic workflows, which goes back to like the larger question, is when you start thinking about how you're governing. I think what Mike was sort of pointing out there, as far as like really thinking about where they fit in and where they fit in well, the way we've implemented technology in the past, frankly, doesn't really work that great in this capacity. When we start seeing companies that are wrestling with this topic, what you're really seeing is, a real concern. And when you see these these stories, I think there was one I saw last night. I forget which model it was or which tool it was, but basically an agent wiping out an entire database, right? Like those are real concerns, right? So what you get then is a company who's like really concerned about even getting into this stuff. So then you have to start to reinvent processes, right? You have to start to really think about, all right, we're going to try to put this into our workflows, but number one, how well do we understand our workflows, right? How much should we be worried about those existing workflows, because are they broken to begin with? And then it's a question of, okay, then how do we then introduce this either semi-autonomous or autonomous tool to go run processes, and then hopefully have it meet the mark that we're trying to meet. I think what Mike pointed out, which I think is a really good way of thinking about this, is where are humans good at a job and where are they not good at a job, right? And really trying to like measure that out, but then also coming up with a measured approach to not just how you're rolling it out, but then the privileges you provide agents along that workflow, so that you're not just sort of, throwing it in the mix and hoping everything works out, right? And because I think that's unfortunately, and especially in a world where you have CEOs and boards and who are really pushing the AI agenda, right? We have to be more AI powered. Have to be really thoughtful about how that fits within your organization. And to me, that does come back to even reevaluating how you're functioning at the ground level.
All right, two pieces of things that I can talk about where things are going to head. So we've been at Pre.dev, we've been working with OpenAI, XAI, and a few of these other bigger labs. One thing that they're really focused on doing now is creating very hyper specialized models. Essentially, the issue right now is that you're using a very general purpose model to do a very hyper specific thing, right? Like you aren't going to hire a PhD to like do data entry, right? I mean, they'll be able to do it, but there's a little bit of that non-deterministic aspect as the agent goes about it. So now these labs are super interested in essentially training and building RL environments to build very, very hyper specific models who are, say, very good at Excel or very, very good at operating a specific piece of software. So that I think is going to happen. So models as they exist now are just too broad to do very hyper specific things. And then one other thing that's happening as well, which is that AI's doing work is going to explode to such an extent that we aren't really ready for it. The biggest example is GitHub right now. If GitHub had enterprise SLAs, they would violate all of them, because agents are starting to push so much code to GitHub that they can't handle the load. And so it's just an interesting kind of thing that like these agents are starting to do so much work that our infrastructure as it exists now is not ready to handle it, which is just a very cool problem to have.
That issue you raised about the hyper-trained models, Arjun, that's a fascinating area, and I don't want to get us too far down a rabbit hole already. But what I wonder, I've been reading more and more in the last couple of weeks about how the conversation is developing in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, as well as DC, regarding the impact on jobs and the economy. And I wonder what level of responsibility accrues to the model manufacturers, as it were, with respect to industry-specific targeting. Like you talked about very specific functionality and models trained there, but I think the next question is there a responsibility to roll these out in a deliberate fashion based on industry or function as opposed to a very specific feature set?
I think okay, this is going to get a bit geopolitical here, but there's a responsibility for America itself to push the boundaries. When you look at what the Chinese are doing with robots, it's incredible. The administration understood that they're going to have a population crisis in the next 20 years. And they're going to basically not have enough people to work. And so they've gone full on building robots that are incredible. Like they have outpaced everyone. And so I think America has to take a look at that. As of now, at least we're a leap ahead in terms of LLMs. And so I think to shy away from using those, I think is a mistake. I think it is a bit scary, but I think you just have to push on it from all angles, and that like, okay, yeah, we need to compete on a global stage.
I if I could hop in, I also think that, I mean, what we're seeing as far as impact and effectiveness is concerned with AI in general is really about specificity, right? It is really about how do I understand a problem in a workflow at a deep level in order to create a solution to really solve those problems. I read a great article from a startup consulting with, and they were talking about how like the work they did, this is a company that builds like an inventory system, and the work they did in the warehouse hands-on is what makes the system work so well, because they understand the needs, they understand all of the little fine points and nuances that go into moving a product from one place to the other, right? Like those are the sorts of things that are really going to make it valuable. I think what Arjun said about like, you know, thinking about like the more generalized models and like expecting a PhD to do data entry. It's a really good point, right? And I think when we start thinking about what our responsibility is as far as rolling these out is concerned, I do think that's where it starts. I think it starts with, really truly understanding where the friction points lie, understanding them at a super deep level, and then building technology that helps to address them very specifically versus having this more sort of generalized tech to solve the problem.
I mean, we've talked about like in this prior to this is like context is king. And so I do think a lot of people all of your points are they think AI is a silver bullet for anything and everything, but you still have to roll your sleeves up, give it the context, put the right guardrails in place, make sure it has the right access to data, make sure it is operating the way you would expect it to. The companies that are doing that are going to reap the benefits. And I think they're going to be able to scale at a pace that's going to be exponential to those that are just thinking it's going to solve it. And I honestly believe, this is just my opinion, some of those early companies that said, what was that MIT study? 90+% of AI is failing.
Yep.
95.
Actually,
Yes.
I think it's because they didn't roll their sleeves up and do the work, which is also the reason why a lot of projects fail, regardless of the technology using. And then the second piece is they went after the most complex problems they were trying to solve. And it's like, sink your teeth on something that's, a bite size and get used to it, adopt it. That's like 101 when it comes to any sort of emergent or new tech.
Well, I also think, Mike, and you can speak to this as far as your ChatGPT rollout, right? Like, I think there's a reality here where we just sort of assumed we're going to put the tech in people's hands and they're just going to run with it. It's like, we're talking about, this isn't just like lighten up, Microsoft, and Word and giving people access to tools that they kind of already knew how to use for years. This is whole new workflows and dynamics and rethinking things from the ground up, right? And so, to your point about kind of starting small, I think that's why you're seeing, or we're seeing anyways, that's what we do. I don't go in and we consult with a client, try to get their biggest problem out of the way. It's like, no, why don't we just sort of solve that data entry issue? Yeah. That would save you a ton of time. And then I also think it's a matter of rethinking what work looks like, right? Like, I do think this is the time to be creative. I think there's that shared sort of balance between tactical day-to-day job stuff, right? And my capacity to really provide value back to a business, whoever's employing me, right? Like that balance is shifting hard in the latter, right? Like and I think that's great. And I think what it's going to do, and this will impact everything from upskilling and workforce development right down into education. All of a sudden it makes creative thinking that much more important when we think about what does the future of, your day-to-day work life look like?
Yeah. Humans are creatures of habit. And so we're up against a major change to the way a lot of people work. Right. And so you have to come at it at multiple angles. Right. So that's why when we rolled it out, we had hackathons, we had sessions. We actually took the work component out of it in some of these sessions and say, here's some personal use cases that create a recipe for a barbecue you have. Here's a picture, upload it. And you start to see, Mike knows this analogy, the light switch is going off on people and then they're in. But listen, the other thing that this kind of reminds me of, and I was reading an article about it, is, listen, we all talk about hallucination, and that is a big concern. By the way, like, I think there's a concept of, the thing I worry about is sort of the slow one, where it's like you don't really see it, it's making a subtle change, and next thing you know, you've missed a bunch. Interesting thing to me is like, that is happening with humans doing jobs too, right? People get comfortable. They keep doing the same thing and they don't think about outside of those like horse blinders they have on. So I just think it's always intriguing to me that we are holding this technology at such a higher bar than we arguably are holding some of the humans that are doing it today.
I think obviously I bring a bit of a dev side to this. So, there are layers to a rollout. I think at a high level, experimentation is the thing, right? So how can you remove guardrails while keeping guardrails? So the need for an internal organization to be creative and to leverage their employees and their people to build out their ideas. But right, you mentioned before that, hey, if you've got something down the waterfall 4 layers that did something, how do I know where it did that? And how can I trace that? So there needs to be a sort of tiered approach where you can level up or score something against sort of its risks. So to that point, you're leveraging the people that are working with that role for how it works for them. And then you can kind of score that as you consider rollout across the org. And I think that's a huge piece here because, Mike mentioned as well, if you aren't thinking about these things, you could end up deleting your entire platform and your entire product, which should never be a scenario that you should be in ever. So there's a lot of that consideration as well. It's a partnership of creativity and technical ability.
Let's hit here, Diego. I'm making this mark for editing here. 21 minutes. I'm getting a lot of feedback here on my end. Is that you on your end? I can.
Yeah, but there's a lot of feedback noise.
Yeah, it sounds like you're in a wind tunnel. Okay. All right. We'll cut out the 21-minute mark. All right. That's for our editor. Where were we here? Josh, I'm interested to go a little bit deeper on some of what you were just touching on there and kind of the longer or larger conversation here about this nature of, because it's fascinating to me, the errors that we tolerate that humans make and the errors that we tolerate or don't tolerate that the AI makes. And you kind of touched on that a little bit here with some of your comments. So I don't know if you've got any additional thoughts on that or anybody else does, but this comes up all the time.
I think fundamentally it's due to obfuscation, right? That the AIs are doing things that you're not really looking at, right? I think there was kind of a precedent set with like human beings that like, hey, we're gonna check work and stuff. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I actually looked at like a line of code, right? Like even though I wrote code for 20 years, right? And over the last year, I haven't looked at a single line, right? And so I think because obviously the AI became powerful enough to write code and edit and like help find bugs and everything, but at the same time, it's made me lazy. And so
I appreciate you calling yourself out on that, though. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it has. And I'm definitely not like an outlier there. It's made everyone, right? Like even, I mean, I have my Claude Code help me read my emails. Like it has gone to like a pretty insane extent and it's amazing. But at the same time, yeah, I think that it is actually not even an AI issue. It's much more of a...
Yeah, but Arjun, I would challenge you, Arjun. Did it make you lazy or did it make you leverage a tool so that you could focus on the things that were most important to you?
And then what does lazy mean? Because here's the thing. I guarantee you're spending a lot of time doing some really valuable stuff, right? Like I know you, Arjun, and I know your background, and I don't think you're like twiddling your thumbs, at an 8-hour workday, like 6 of those hours, right? Like, so let's talk about that.
Sure. Okay. I guess it's more this. In the same way that like when I talk to in my AI or whatever AI, I kind of talk to it in the way that I would like say a trusted employee and stuff, right? Where I kind of trust that they're going to execute on what I'm asking them. And so I think it's a weird thing where I just have built an implicit trust with the AI in that way. So my willingness to like I wouldn't really go and check in on an employee's work and stuff. I'm just expecting like the outcome, right? And so I think that for me, as long as the outcome is what I wanted, I'm like, okay, cool. But do I go into the weeds as much as I would have? But now I'm doing obviously 10 to 20 times as much of work, right? So it's not feasible at the same time too. So I think it's just a consequence of that we're doing more and it's impossible to verify as easily as it used to be when you were just doing less.
I want to highlight that word real quick, or that phrase that you threw out there, Arjun, implicit trust. I think that is really, really important. And I think it's important because we're all still trying to figure out what the nature of this co-working relationship with these systems are as they continue to evolve at an exponential pace. And that phrase that you just said, that implicit trust that you're handing over, or that you're extending, maybe that's a better word for it, that you're extending. I think that that's something that we can all relate to with our human coworkers. And that's the next step in this. And I wanted to just pause and highlight that, because everybody on this call is either building, working with, or deploying on behalf of themselves or clients this technology, which puts you guys in a really unique space to be at the bleeding edge of human AI interaction and what that actually means for us sociologically, economically, productivity wise. So Josh, you had some comments there, but I wanted to turn that back to you.
No, it's a great point. And I just wanted to bring another sort of dev example of something that we're dealing with internally, which is the question of code quality. And this goes back into like that sort of laziness thing that we just talked about, right? Am I concerned over the way my AI is writing code for the other AIs to read the code and then iterate on? That could be the thing. We're debating is like, as long as it's still optimal and it's, our Claude's not writing 100 lines of switch statements, the code is geared for them in a way. So something to think about is that I think there needs to be a realization that our paradigm of communication has changed. And from my perspective, that implicit trust piece is important, because the second I feel myself, hitting enter over and over again quickly, that's usually when I'm like, I need to be more of a devil's advocate here and question everything. And that could even be going to multiple models and multiple providers to get different inputs. So there's a lot that can go into what that realized trust is. How is it 100% trust? Is it 50% trust? How can you manage that as you're going through your workflow?
I would say personal productivity is the leading indicator here, right? I mean, individual wins don't add up automatically, right? There needs to be some sort of process predefined so that all of this individual gain that people are getting out of using AI can be reflected at the enterprise level, right? At the enterprise ROI. How do we bring the conversation to from the individual to the group, and how do we reorganize internally as a company to adopt the process that AI can do better if we think about it differently, right? And stop trying to just redo the same thing with a better tool. It's like using a Ferrari to, go drop your school, to go drop your kids to school every day. Like, you get the same job done, but are you getting it done more efficiently, right? You're probably better off using that Ferrari for a race. So, just think about it like that. And for me, the companies are not doing that enough, right? To fully realize the value that they can be obtaining, that famous 10x productivity gain, right? That everyone is trying to pursue. Well, you're not going to get that with just throwing people, AI tools and go deal with them.
Well, this goes back to it's hitting on both those things. And I think what Josh said, I think, is a really important factor. And I go back to this idea that we are now in an era of creativity, right? We need to rethink and reestablish a lot of these processes, because, I think it's kind of really interesting. Like, what Josh does as an engineer is going to be different than what some of our other engineers do, because the way we're all using these tools is going to be slightly different. I had a great conversation with, guy runs AI for a big technology organization in the area recently. And that was one of the big debates we had was, especially as an enterprise organization, like, they want people functioning in the same way, right? They want them using the same tools, going through the same processes, et cetera, which I understand. Business 101, right? We're going to get, economies of scale there. We're going to create the efficiencies. They get, and Mike can speak to this, right? You get billing discounts, right? Because, all the licenses you have and I get all that from a business perspective, but I don't think that's really the power of AI. I think the power of AI is that, we all think differently. We all function differently. And I think that what we're starting to see now is that even how we learn, right? There are people who are auditory learners, there are people who are tactical learners, right? Like I know the way I learn is always sort of like breaking something apart and putting it back together again, right? Like I was never someone who was going to like read, a book end to end and then follow the process end to end. I kind of get the gist and I make it up as I go. It's just always been how I've been. But that's kind of the interesting part about this. You can't, there are too many processes that this impacts to try to like recreate all that in one shot. Right? Like this is going to be an iterative moment in time. It's going to be, okay, we're going to try working with it this way. Let's see how that goes. Let's make sure we do our best to have guardrails and that we're protecting against the downside, but know that like, hey, anything can happen here. So we're going to have to, kind of roll with it. Right.
You're raising a fascinating question here, Mike, because it's essentially, when does the process matter versus when does the result matter more? And do we need the process to get the result? So I think that kind of little Venn diagram there, and when you insert the human component into it, like where does the human need to be creative to get the result versus where do we just have railroad tracks for the AI to follow the process to get the result?
I think there's a good example of that, which is like, I don't know, a block of clay, right? Everybody's tasked to make a bowl, right? But you could put that in a factory line and do it the same way every time. But if you hand that same block of clay to 10 people, they're going to make a different bowl, but it's still a bowl. So I think that's the piece, is like, there's now the ability to implement self-skill and self-creativity into a product that used to be standardized, or a process that used to be standardized. I love front end. So I am now able to build out more front end UX and UI without having to consult somebody else. It's a thing that I like to do, and now I can leverage that. So that is a huge thing, I think, that needs more consideration. That it's becoming, in my mind, about the person who is willing to leverage AI to help them and enhance them. And yeah, everybody's skill set is unique now, even more so.
Yeah, I'll shut up after this because I know I'm doing a lot of talking here. But one thing, because I think that's a really interesting point, and I think that's fundamentally at the crux of like what makes AI powerful is, and especially as we think about like agents and we think about what we're expecting those agents to do, it's more about what Josh was kind of getting at, the goal of making the bowl, than it is about how I made the bowl, right? And especially in a non-deterministic environment, where you're asking this agent to function as a human would, where you're giving it some instructions, but it can assess whether or not that's really the best way to do it. When the reality is we build processes so that, because it was inefficient not to have processes. Well, now when you have systems that can reevaluate those processes in a matter of seconds and make them more efficient on the fly as new models become available, as new components of the process become available, all of that, right? Like, what's a process then, right? Like, what are we really asking of these systems at that point, right? I just think it's a super interesting place to be when we start thinking about what does ultimate productivity look like? And then these companies who are looking for billions of dollars in savings and efficiencies, are they going about it the wrong way?
And that brings us back to the original point of governance, right? Like if we think about all this creativity and leeway that the agents are now being assigned and given for a task, what really makes all of these agents useful for a company? Well, in my opinion, is the ability to pull the plug whenever something goes off the break, right? Because if you really think about it, an agent that doesn't have guardrails, that doesn't have a human in the loop to just check on the work that is happening there, could really do some great things, but can also give us really bad outcomes, right? And potentially problematic outcomes, legal problems, and stuff like that, right? If you don't govern well your agentic solutions, if you don't have the right guardrails, if you don't think about how the agent versus human interact in an efficient way, you might be getting into trouble, right? And the frameworks of today don't really, they give you the start, They give you the basics, like NIST and ISO stuff, but are they really covering all of this, end to end, as we're putting it today? I don't think so.
I want to push a little harder on that, Diego, because what I wonder is, can we even get to a point where we've got the most effective guardrails? Can we get to a point where that works? And I think about the 30 years I've spent in leadership development working with human capital. This is why law firms and HR professionals exist, because we've tried to deploy governance around human capital, and it's kind of sort of successful, but not really, candidly, because we're all, free range chickens. And I'm wondering, can what you're talking about actually be achieved, and at what level with AI?
I think, Chad, to your point, I was going to share, I totally agree. I think working in a highly regulated company, we actually need the regulators and legislation to change. And I don't know how fast that's going to happen. They're going to always require, at least for the near term, a process. That these processes that we were talking about, as a check and balance. Now, we need them to iterate. I think that we can get into a different spot, but for particularly these highly regulated areas and industries, that's going to be a bit of a blocker and a challenge. I still don't think there is enough value, meat on the bone, things that we can do with AI that is going to make the company more efficient and more successful just leveraging the tool. But I think we're going to reach a ceiling where there's going to be external pressure from a regulatory and a legislation standpoint to say, we can't be operating audits and FDIC items the same way we did back in 1970. Like we just can't. So I'm intrigued to see how that side of it plays out, particularly in the industry that I'm at.
I think you're spot on, Mike. And unfortunately, I think what's going to happen is we're going to have a major crisis or an issue with a company that prompts that. 100%. I think about all the regulation we've seen over the last 50 years in the United States, and it's all the result of some major company implosion like Enron or the financial
Wells
crisis
Fargo
of 08.
And their sales.
And we're going to,
you got it.
Oh yeah. We're going to overcourse correct. So Arjun, you were jumping in, and then Josh, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's actually really interesting. I forget who it was, but there's a few tech insurers now that have explicitly said any hack or like downtime that is caused by an AI, they are not going to handle, which is a really interesting thing, right? That like they themselves don't believe that there's a way to actually control the AI in a meaningful way. And to be honest, I actually really don't blame them, because they are kind of right there. That it's just the technology to properly harness the models does not exist. And a really stark example of that we've seen right now, within the Pre.dev agent itself, we were able to essentially use the Pre.dev harness to get Anthropic's Haiku model to perform as good as Opus 4.5 on like a few of the benchmarks, which is a crazy thing. It just means that previously this really small model was not being used in the appropriate ways that it could have been. I mean, there's a bunch of things that come out of that, but the point being is that the harness and how the AIs are being used is still very much an art, not a science yet.
Arjun, I want to clarify something. We've got a lot of listeners, and I get email from people all the time like, I don't know what you were just talking about. Can you just take like 30 seconds and define harness for our non-technical listeners?
Yes. A harness fundamentally is a means to provide the AI specific context at the right time. Meaning that I have an AI doing some grandiose thing, right? I wanted to make an app, a website. I wanted to edit Excel sheets, whatever, right? So Claude Code is an example of a harness. It has wrapped a LLM in a conversational back and forth. And so that is what the harness is. It's the means to orchestrate what context is being fed to the LLM. And so harnesses are being built from companies all around. They're done open source, closed source. It's fundamentally the means to which you're interacting with the AI, and that harness can be built in many, many ways. And so, yeah, it's and that is the way that we currently control these LLMs.
If I can add to that, we started with prompt engineering, then we went to context engineering, and now we talk about harness engineering, right? It's the evolution of that. And I wanted to tap into what Arjun said before. I question if this lack of confidence in being able to manage the AI is a symptomatic problem of most companies deploying AI and then thinking about governance, and then thinking about how to regulate, then thinking about how to deal with the consequences. One thing that I can tell you is that in prior experiences in the public sector, within the government of California, I did the exact opposite. I started thinking about how the how adoption of AI needed to drive the innovation that followed next, and how the strategy and the policies and guardrails needed to be in place before we even thought about what's the first use case that we're going to leverage now that we have all the necessary tools to gain momentum with AI, right? So I wonder if the problem is systematic in the way it's being approached versus an intrinsic problem of AI adoption.
Diego, I think you're an exception to the rule. Humans are a path of least resistance. AI plays so heavily on that. I have a concern that I've brought up to this group before. There is a lot of people who can literally build a functioning app out in production in a couple hours. And if they have no context, no experience on how to make that secure, make sure that their data has privacy standards, we are just sitting on some potential time bombs for some of this. Now, to your point, that is the right way to approach it, right? Hey, how do I make sure this thing is secure? I'm putting it in the hands. How do I make sure I have the guardrails around it? Like, those are best practices when you're building a system, but you're a technologist. So you know that was what you were trained. I have friends who literally are doing landscaping and they're building apps and pumping all their customer data and they're using AI. And I'm like, listen, buddy, like, you got to make sure when you're deploying this thing that it's secure and you're not sitting on a time bomb.
We were just talking about that, yesterday, with a client. We were talking about, we don't want to hinder their innovation workflow. We don't want to hinder their, vibe-coded solutions that we can create internally. But if we can aid them into creating at least a checklist of how every lovable vibe-coded solution out there can be, put to the test. Like, is it meeting, the minimum security checklist? Is it meeting, the minimum integration checklist for the company's data to be in place? I think that's the key, right? We don't want to hinder that innovation workflow. We don't want to stop the companies developing this tool. We just want to make sure that they are as aligned as possible, right, with best practices. Gadsby.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of tack on. I just devil's advocate to all this. This is all brand new. So I don't care how many checklists you put together. It's not going to cover everything. It's just not. Like, I mean, we're learning things every day. I mean, every time I read like the, privacy statements and whatnot from a lot of these companies, I like kind of trust them, because I don't know that they know exactly what they have. This is the real sort of problem with a lot of AI tech in general. Is we talk about explainability and we talk about it being black box and all of these things, right? Like, that's a concern in general. Now, all that said, which is why I love this sort of moment in time, and maybe there's a little bit of a chaos factor that I'm sort of like just kind of entertained by to some degree, right? But like, the reality is that businesses have to take advantage of this. Not like want to take advantage, but if they don't, they'll get left in the dust, right? Like, they will get absolutely clobbered, right? So they have to do it. So let's take that as like a fact A. Fact B, though, is when you don't know all of the things that could happen, again, non-deterministic in what we're getting out of this, then you're just begging for, that things are going to happen. So I firmly believe that you'll have this sort of run of events, which will be problematic for a lot of businesses. But you're going to have to start to set the expectation that it's not just about the governance and the guardrails you put in place before you go and try to go down this road, but it's the systems and processes that you have to build when something goes wrong, not if, but when something goes wrong, in order to, start to address those issues. Mike, one other quick point, Urban brought this up with which I think is also just a super fascinating thing. I think the public fluency for things like, data protection and whatnot is going to have to increase as well. So just like we all learned how to use Word and Excel and, and all that, like people understanding what it means to lock down their customer information on the whole, that's a thing that I just think is going to be one of those things from an upskilling perspective that your general public, your folks who are picking this up to become more efficient at work are going to have to sort of start to figure out and learn themselves. By the way, myself included.
And we haven't talked about this yet, and maybe there's a future spot, is we haven't talked about the people who have malicious intent, how they're using these tools. And so listen, their game in town is to find a vulnerability as quick for the least amount of effort that they need to take. And so we do have to think about that point as well.
There are attacks happening every single second today with open source models. Let's just narrow it down to that. Okay, every single second, hundreds of attacks are being logged using open source models like Chinese models we were talking about before, right? Open source models that are from the U.S. counterparts. So it really doesn't make any difference. Models are getting, a lot of value, and we are getting a lot of value out of them, but they can also be repurposed for bad intent, right?
Yeah, I would say, there's a couple things there. Ultimately, everybody's chasing a moving target, and nobody has a clue as to what we're chasing. So it's two problems there, two big problems. And I think, an example of that is Opus 4.7, Anthropic's new model, came out for Claude. And all of really good devs across the board and all these other people had drastically different experiences from what they were working with before. That was consistent enough to be trustable, right? But a new model comes out and it changes the paradigm about how that model processes text and prompts. And all of a sudden, your consistent process is broken entirely. I dealt with that. I had to refactor everything. So just a point there is that even the people building these solutions are still chasing a moving target. So that trickles down even further when you're talking about your site security. Like, how are you even protecting yourself against what's unknown? You have that Mythos model running around theoretically, penetration testing things. You have other ones. So we don't really know how to scale that and how big of a threat that is as to how to evaluate correctly. So our security checklists will have to constantly change month to month as we go through this. It's not a static thing. There's no state of saying I'm safe. And I think that's a big misconception.
Josh, on that point though, just so we don't scare the shit out of every single
no
listener
scare,
in
no
the world
scare.
Here. No, I just want to be clear though too, is the upside to using a lot of this tech is also puts us in a situation to combat some of these concerns with the AI is also really a lot of the answer too. Now, I'm no cybersecurity expert, but I will say that it is really telling that, the amount of dollars kind of going into this, going the other direction to sort of combat a lot of this stuff, I think is real. And I think it's been encouraging to see that if you take the position of I can use this for good and continue to use this for good, that you can create a lot of really awesome, really great things. I just think to your point about sort of those checklists changing on the fly, it's a little too dynamic to have a checklist. I'll just say that. A checklist is a good place to start. But I think I know what you're doing, Josh. We're talking about evals and we're talking about, systems that are basically keeping systems in check, right? those are the sorts of things that I think are going to have to become more fluid and I would say more standard practice when we start, talking about these bigger rollouts.
Just a few minutes ago, Claude launched Claude Security. I mean, there you go. Talking about, using those dollars for good, right? And investing in good stuff, right? Like Mythos was put out there to the ether with, the concept of this is too dangerous for us to release it. Now there's a subset of this capabilities that is being released for doing exactly what Mythos would be able to do at a larger scale, right? And this is targeting enterprise cybersecurity, right? Fixing vulnerabilities internally, fixing code, fixing network security issues. So, this is stuff that is happening live right now as we speak, guys.
AWS announcement this week is huge, right? They signed a deal with OpenAI to have their models on their platform. Anthropic just expand the capabilities that you can do with AWS. Listen, AWS is like tried and true and proven out. People trust it. So now it's sitting in something that people have trust already about. So I think it's been game changing this week, some of the recent news. Mike, back to your point, like I'll give you 2 real life examples. We have seen quite a bit of uptick on bot activity. So malicious activity trying to infiltrate our application process to either test out whether they have accurate data that they bought on the dark web or not. We've leveraged a solution called Neural ID, which is purely AI-based behavioral analytics from a web perspective, and it is combating the AI that the bad people are using. So it's such a great, exciting use case for us. And then I'll tell you another one just on the business side. Complaints data. We were scratching the surface on 10% of our data. Just take a sampling of all of our call transcripts just to see if there were any complaints. With AI, we are now able to look at 100% of those things without any human intervention. And then we have the humans looking at the results. Those are game changing. Like that's exciting. Like that ability to tap into that data is great. I know we went down to a dark place with secure and making sure, which you all have to do, but like it is, to your point, Mike, like it's exciting. Some of the things that we can unlock were things that months ago we weren't even sure were possible. We just made do with what we had.
So I think that's a really good pivot into maybe a more optimistic take for our final 10 or 12 minutes here, which is possibility, right? What are you all seeing out there that is possible? What are you most excited about right now that's on the horizon? We touched on some of the AWS announcements. We're recording this episode early May of 26. So by the time it comes out, that'll have been battle tested. There's a lot of new developments on the horizon other than the mythical Mythos, which may or may not be released to the general public at some point. What are you all most excited about? I'm interested.
It's a hard question. I think that's the first piece. There's too much to be excited about. I think I'll split it into 2. So on the dev side, I think it's the ability to feel more confidence in the amount of code that you're building. That was a problem for me, as well as I'm sure Arjun used well. But that trust level, the more code you're writing from a single person, the harder it is to even understand what you've written without that effort. So I think that's a piece to have a bit more confidence in the model pushing back on an idea or checking itself or doing something like that. So further progression and not so much sycophancy. And then the other side is I'm just really excited about everybody having a connection to technology. Even if it's, who cares what app you're building? I think just the fact that you can build something is incredible. And I've already seen that from so many people who are not technical. And again, we're not talking about anything in terms of public release, but like the rate at which somebody can draw their ideas down on paper and make it come to fruition now from a single person is so huge. And that really excites me a lot.
Can I hop on that second bit that Josh said there? So when you asked the question, my immediate thought was like, all right, what's the new sort of, advancement in AI and technology that's coming out that I'm super interested in? But I'm going to change my thinking now to I plus one, that second part that Josh sort of hit on. I actually think that's been You mentioned 1682, our conference. Well, one of the big themes we're looking at this year is this idea that, AI for all, and the idea that AI is really democratizing technology on the whole, and that it allows the people who understand the problems to get closer to the solutions in a way that we've never really had. I was telling an advisor yesterday, I was putting together models for some of the new solutions we're building, and in a couple hours, I had everything from, a full financial model to, website copy to, right down into some direction. Josh doesn't know this yet, but for Josh to help us sort of standardize the product, one of the products that we're building, right? This would have taken me weeks. And then I was also able to put a whole interface together that you can pull all of the little levers to sort of play with the model and all of these things, right? It has allowed me, somebody who really likes to think hard about this stuff and really, to express myself in a different way. I can only imagine what that's going to mean for a young series of entrepreneurs. I can only imagine what it's going to mean at Wharton, Arjun, when we talk about what entrepreneurship means now and what the expectations are. I mentioned before some mentorship with startups, and it's been awesome to see a couple of them that I'm familiar with, go from, oh man, we really need to get funding, to, I don't know if we really need that funding anymore, or we're going to change our thinking about that funding now because I just was able to get a product to market and I have customers now and I can rethink what we're doing with those dollars, right? That's really exciting. That's really exciting to think about all the new problems that are going to be able to get solved because we are empowering people, everyday people, to do that.
Yeah, for me, it's the jolt to the system. It's a much needed jolt to the overall system. And we've had these jolts in the past. Industrial revolution, the internet, cloud computing. We've had these major jolts to the system, to the way we work. And we've come out being more efficient, solving deeper problems. And so for me, this is a jolt. And so I'm excited what that's going to cause us to do in the future. That's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really the economies of scale that is happening to AI now. That a very, very small model now is already smarter than the best model a year ago, right? So, and I think as costs go down even more, it's just gonna enable a lot more work than you were ever able to do. A really quick example is I now spin hundreds of browser agents to help me find a restaurant to book in the evening, right? Because I don't want to manually go on Resi and stuff. And so it's and that, if I had tried that a year ago with agents, that single kind of 100 spin ups and stuff would have costed me $25 plus. Now it costs me 20 cents. And so I think as things are going to get cheaper over time, it's just going to allow you to automate and do a lot more. And so that is what intrigues me a lot. And on a other hyper specific thing, I'm actually very excited for what Apple is going to turn into. I think Apple, for good, they stand for privacy more than any company that I have seen, and they have a phenomenal monopoly on building great CPUs and GPUs. So I think they're going to really lean into local private inference in a way that just normal consumers have not had access to, right? That right now, if you're skilled enough, you can get a local model running for basically free that is going to interact with you in the same way that Chat GPT does. And so I think the new CEO looks like he's going to really push that to the next stage. So I think you're going to see that happen a lot more.
So I think what I'm most excited for is this intersection between AI and humanity. I've always positioned myself as standing at that intersection, and that's where I see the tremendous opportunity here. I've spent a lot of my career walking into rooms and telling myself, you're not the smartest guy in the room. We know this. Who is? And what can I learn from them? How can I use them to sharpen my saw? And I find myself more and more finding that AI can help serve that role. So whether we're talking about individualized education or higher education, you've got access to a council of elders, not to tell you what to do, but to show you what you do well, to show you what you don't do well, to challenge your thinking, to provide different perspectives. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about intellectual cognitive knowledge work or if we're talking about hands-on trades work. I think it applies to both. And we're seeing that intersection now. And that potential is what really excites me. It's absolutely fascinating. And I think it can serve, to again, shine a positive light on this as opposed to that darker cybersecurity light. I think that this can serve to elevate the entire human race and the entire human experience. That's what excites me.
So, I mean, one thing I can add after all of this good stuff is, for me, it's the ability to have AI enable more than one thing happening for individuals at this point in time simultaneously. I'm talking about agentic AI. So 2023 was, that year of having, conversations, individual conversations with the chat window, right? That was good. That enabled people to think deeper, to get answers, right, immediately, and you can even produce some stuff here and there. But the shift has now gone into agentic. So for me, this 2026, what excites me the most about is not just democratizing the access to AI, is the ability for people to, make the shift to agentic AI usage, right? We're seeing tools like Claude, coworker. We're seeing tools like, ChatGPT 5.5 that are much better at giving this type of extra experience to people than we've ever seen before, right? Claude Code was really good for developers, but now we're seeing this shift into technology that is accessible to everyone, that is, allows us to just tell the AI, help me with all these different things, and just go away and come back to a bunch of outputs, right? OpenClaw was the first tectonic shift that we saw as a very, very viral application that helped drive this concept for the general audiences. So how much more of that we're going to see in 2026? That's what it's asking. It's not. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Diego. All right, gentlemen. An hour goes quickly here in podcast land. So I want to thank you all for your time today. I'm going to exercise my prerogative as host to say that this is a wrap. It's been a fantastic session. And for all of our listeners out there, thank you for once again listening to AI for the C-Suite. If this episode was useful, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, follow us on LinkedIn, and check out aifortheCsuite.com. And until next time, keep your algorithms running, your leadership evolving, and your AI in check. Thank you, super friends, and take care, everybody.